The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Let me just say, after video distorting the belt, they're proclaiming the real world champion. I'm going to tell y'all, with a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life. When you walk around this world and you tell everybody you're number one, the only way you get to stay number one is to be number one.
And good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Captain Lou Extravaganza. We are live on the Captain Lou Sports Network, and we're powered up by Belly Up Sports, the Belly Up Network of podcasts, you name it. It's a great day for sports. Round number 2 of the Stanley Cup Playoffs underway last night with a couple of good games, and of course, wrapping up round number 1 with another Game 7. We're going to talk about that shortly. We just want to remind you to follow us on Twitter at The Real Captain Lou, or on our Facebook page, The Captain Lou Extravaganza, my personal page, Louis Gamlin, or drop me a line at sweetlou1965 at yahoo.com. Stanley Cup Playoffs, as we mentioned, round 2 underway. We got a couple of great round 2 matchups coming up tonight. And let's bring in a special guest here tonight, or this morning rather, host of a great podcast, the 1420 Sports Bar podcast, none other than Brent Radlinsky. Brent, thanks for coming in this morning. How are you?
I'm good, Lou. Great games last night. I was a little bit late last night watching that overtime game between Seattle and Dallas, and so now we're here talking some hockey. No place I'd rather be than right here talking to you.
You know, you mentioned the Seattle game last night and the return of Joel Pavelski. Wow, what a return. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 goals. And unfortunately for me, I fell asleep when they went into overtime, and I missed the good goal to win it for the Kraken. But my, oh my, they came out guns a-blazing in that first period, the Kraken did. And I got to tell you, they are not an expansion franchise anymore. They're a team that's built to go ways.
Well, it's crazy how expansion teams have changed the way that they've been built over the years. You go back not that many years, how the Vegas Golden Knights they found themselves out of nowhere in a Stanley Cup final back in 2016 or 17, whatever year that was. And then you have the Seattle Kraken in their second year of existence, getting by the Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche in 7. And then last night, finding a way to score 4 times. And the guy who I think is one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League right now with Ottinger, who couldn't stop vulcanized rubber last night for some reason there, that 2-minute span where it was goal after goal on both ends. And what a game that last night. And you watched that game last night, not so much the Leafs game, but the Seattle Dallas game last night. It's such a league of have and have nots, and you watch the speed that Seattle team has and the speed that Dallas, and you watch some teams that didn't make the playoffs, how they're so far behind these teams that did. And it's crazy to watch that game last night. And like you said, holding off Pavelski, keeping him to a 4 spot. You don't say that very often, because you watch the stats last night, and there was only 5 guys in the history of the game who scored 5 in a game. Pavelski had a chance. I don't know what the stats are of a guy getting all 5 goals for his team, but that was unprecedented. He was getting them early and often off his, and the deflections and how he's getting those goals is unbelievable to watch.
You know, you talked about the speed of Seattle. It was like an organized chaos in that opening period. You know, Pavelski got that goal early, but it didn't rattle Seattle. And that's what impressed me the most. And they came in, they put the full court press on, if you will, and didn't let up. You mentioned the first game. You know, you wonder about Toronto. You know, they finally broke through. You know, they got that Game 6 win against Tampa. And then now they're hosting Florida. You wonder about a letdown, but it just had a weird feel to that game last night, Brent. I mean, Florida controlled it, and they forced them into those turnovers is what I could see out of that game.
Well, that's kind of what I thought, Lou, as well. Is the way that it's the Matthew Tkachuk show. Like the way that guy is pressing, the way he's going, and he put that team on his back a little bit after Game 4 against the Bruins, and then last night he was doing the same thing, forechecking hard. They got a save here and there last night. I don't know what their goaltending can do as he moves, because you never know what you're going to get out of Bobrovsky. They're $10 million guy, but that Leafs team, it's like, to me, the Florida Panthers are kind of playing with house money. They beat the Bruins, and they have a good team. Obviously, people forget that they were the President's Cup champions last year, and they got rid of a guy who was a bit of a cancer in Huberdeau, who they sent to Calgary. You want to talk about that little disaster they got going on later on, but that's getting a guy like Tkachuk in there, and he's saying, jump on my back. And the guy that I really liked a lot in that Game 7, and then last night he's doing the same thing, was next Calgary Flame as well, with Sam Bennett. He's a rock'em sock'em Don Cherry kind of a player, and he doesn't mind getting his nose dirty a little bit, and he's going to be the guy that's going there. The problem that I have with the Leafs a little bit, it seems to me that they celebrated a little too hard for winning a round. Yes, it's been a long go, but a lot of those players weren't around, obviously, for the 19 years, so they shouldn't have been taking that to heart. The way that Dubas and Spezza were celebrating in the GM's box after they won Game 6, it seemed to me that it was a little too exuberant for me, and they may have won their Stanley Cup on that one. I know the Leafs fan base is kind of thinking the same thing. They have some swagger, but I'd be worried about because eventually Samsonov's bound to have a stinker of a game. He wasn't great last night, and goaltending in general hasn't been great throughout the playoffs. Nobody has that guy anymore. No. But the Leafs should be a little bit concerned going down one, because now you have a team that's 3 wins away and not 4 like they are, and the winning pedigree isn't there with any of the guys. You have O'Reilly there, but you just don't know what they can do. And the Leafs got to find a way to win next game, or man, it could be over early, because you get a team on a heater playing on house money like Florida is. It could be lights out early. I'm a Leafs guy through and through, but I don't know what's going to happen there, and you just don't know how far this can go.
Well, we'll talk about you talked about the goaltending, and that's a great point. I haven't seen a dominant one. Maybe the closest was Schmid, the rookie. Well, I call him a rookie, 22 years old. Yeah, let's go back to Game 7 Monday night with the Rangers and the Devils. Brent, for a team that you would think both teams would have a little bit of urgency in a Game 7, I just was amazed at how the Devils dominated them in Game 7. It's like the Rangers have had a couple of stinker games, and that Game 7, it just they were rattled. It looked like they were out hustled on the boards. The lazy turnovers. You could see in the intermission how frustrated Mark Messier was. Boy, he wanted to jump over the desk and wanted to grab a stick and get out there. And already they're talking, Brent, about Gallant possibly getting let go. Talking about an ouster of him. What a crazy 48 hours for the Rangers. All of a sudden now they want to blow it up because of what they did, before the deadline. And now they're out. The Devils go on.
That's I talked about that with a buddy the other night. We were talking about the Rangers seem to be like, after Game 2, they seem like we're too good to be in this series. We're the New York Rangers. They're the New Jersey Devils. They're the little brother in the Hudson River battle, and they just weren't. The Devils decided, we're going to play some hockey. We got a good hockey club over here. We're going to do some damage. Our goalie's finally making some saves, and the Rangers haven't done anything really of any substance. They made a Stanley Cup final in 2013, I think it was, or 2014 against the Kings. But they haven't really done anything of substance since '94. That acquisition of getting Patrick Kane didn't do anything for them throughout. Like, even after the trade deadline, he was uninspired throughout. And you got to wonder, when do you start running out of coaches? It's eventually the players have to take a little bit of onus, because they looked disinterested in that game. I flipped it on in the first period, what happened to the first period, and I said, this game's over already. That the Rangers had zero pushback. The Devils were good, and they got some goaltending. When that series was 2-0, I thought it was going to be over in 4. The way that I thought this one's going to be a sweep. It's hard to sweep in the National Hockey League playoffs. It doesn't happen very often anymore. But I thought that the Rangers were the better team through and through. I had Rangers in 6, and they should have ended in 6, because that Game 7 was an embarrassment for the Rangers franchise. And like you said, Messier, he probably would have played a lot better, and he hasn't played hockey in 20 years at least, right? So it's one of those things. I think that Messier would have maybe they need a guy like Messier behind the bench or something. I don't know what the thing is with these hockey players now. Isn't more so in hockey than other sports, I guess, but the I don't want to say entitlement, but the lack of pushback you get from a lot of these younger players, that they just say, I'm the player and you can't do anything about it. I make this much money, you can't do anything about it. You can't get rid of me, more so than it was 10, 15 years ago. And the Rangers are the epitome of that. And I don't know what that franchise can do, especially after that complete embarrassment and letdown for that franchise the last week and a half.
That's too bad too, because like you said, they had the talent. I thought that they were going to make a run. Last question on that game. It was the $1 million question yesterday on social media. What did you think? Was that Trouba hit clean?
Oh, man. Oh, that's a tough one, because like as I was watching that game, my brother sent me a message, what a hit. And I'm like, are you cheering it? Are you happy for it? Like, it was a huge collision. It was a huge hit. Did he jump? Was the shoulder? It's so hard to tell because those guys are moving so fast. Can they go back and look? I thought it was a good hockey hit. Was it clean-ish? Yeah. Going through the middle like that with your head down-ish, I thought it was a good hit. I mean, that's a hit. It's not something you want to see. You don't want to see guys get hurt.
No.
You don't want to see guys go down and everything else. But he was smiling in the hand. Well, you wonder if he would have been smiling in the handshake afterwards if they would have won the hockey game. But I thought it was a good hockey hit, personally.
We're joined by Brent Radlinsky of the 1420 Sports Bar podcast. I invite you to subscribe to their YouTube channel. They've got great daily shows all during the week, a little bit of everything, and they'll get you up to date on all the news around in the world of sports. Brent, let's go. Let's talk about Boston and Colorado. First, Boston, they traded for a bunch of players at the deadline, 65 wins, quote unquote, the greatest team of all time for a single season. And, the Panthers, they punked them in overtime. Now there's going to be some changes, obviously. They're in cap hell. Tough way to go for Boston. I don't know what to make of that. That's that is an epic upset, but we all know, like you mentioned earlier, the Stanley Cup playoffs, you just never know. And Colorado, they got dethroned. We already talked about the Kraken winning last night, but I honestly thought with Boston up 3-1, all I can think of, and you might appreciate this, was the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs back, I think it was 86, 87. John Brophy doing the choke sign at the end of the series when Detroit came back in the first round, back when they used to do the playoffs where you did like the Norris. I think it was the first round of the Norris, but boy, oh boy, that collapse is epic for Boston. I don't know where they go to from here.
Well, I was thinking, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they went and they made those trade deadlines to acquire some guys and upset that room. Like those Bruins guys have been together for a long time, and they have a way of doing things. There's a Bruin way, if that's a term that they use. That Cam Neely put that team together, and there's a Bruin way of doing things. They've been, I don't want to say successful, because how successful are you if you have one Stanley Cup? But winning is hard. It is a tough thing to do. But they've had a very, very good, solid franchise for the better part of 12, 13 years. They got that one Stanley Cup in 2011 versus the Vancouver Canucks, and then they really haven't done much since. They're ousted in the second round, mainly the first round a few times, and then this collapse up 3-1. And like you said, they're going into cap hell because Pasternak finally said, I'm getting paid. Enough of this. Like we've been taking hometown discounts for years, and everybody else. Now Bergeron's leaving. Krejci didn't sound too content on him coming back yesterday, the way he's saying, because usually when you have a foot halfway out the door, the rest of the body just follows. And he's kind of one of those guys. He's like, yeah, you know what? Because playing hockey is a lot harder than it was 20 years ago, because now you got to play all year long and you got to work out all year long, and training camp is just another step that you do. And these guys, they play so much at a young age right to their old, and you just lose that thing. Allmark, turns out he was hurt a little bit, but if you win 65 games and you get ousted, you're up 3-1 and have a lead in the third period like they did and give up a late one. That's a tough pill to swallow. And where they go from here, cap hell, like you said, Lou. Like it's tough. It's tough to keep a team together as long as they did and not being successful. Does the ownership group say, well, we didn't win with these guys. Maybe we can win without them, and we can make some changes and do something and try something else because being successful in the regular season, it's okay. They were talking yesterday. I was listening. I don't know what they're going to raise a banner that has a President's Trophy winning insignia on it, but does anybody really care?
Right.
Does anybody put a President's Trophy replica thing on their mantle? No, it's just a thing. It helps your first round matchup a little bit, but those teams that make the playoffs, the way the NHL has it set up now, the way it's always it's different. Like you were talking about the old Norris and Smythe division battles back in the '80s and how it was set up back then. The matchups weren't set like they are now. Like you could almost like clockwork back in January, we knew that the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning were meeting up in the first round. So winning a President's Trophy and going for it the way the Bruins did and having the best team ever, quote unquote, and getting 65 wins, what was it worth it? Like, could they have sat a few guys and just said, okay, well, let's rest some guys. We got guys who are hurt, banged up, or whatever it might be. Bergeron's out. I think the Bruins are going to take a huge step back next year, and this might have been the just the move to catapult it. And it might be one of those things for Bruins fans. This might be a tough pill to swallow, but if they weren't going to win a Stanley Cup, this might be a wake up call for Bruins fans to say, you know what, maybe we just aren't that good.
All right, let's go to round two. I did a poll question yesterday. What is the second round series you're looking forward to the most? And it was pretty close, but Toronto and Florida was, I think, 39%. Then it was Edmonton and Vegas was second. Then Dallas and the Kraken third, and then New Jersey's Carolina series fourth. I'm personally looking forward to the Edmonton Vegas series starting tonight. I think it's going to be an epic series. I think there's going to be a lot of flash. I think back and forth. Give me your thoughts. What is the series you're looking forward to the most?
I'm a Leafs guy, so I watched that with clenched butt cheeks, I guess, a little bit watching that one because you don't know how that's going to. Well, I think we all know how that's going to turn out as Leafs fan. But the one I agree, Lou, that series, Edmonton, Las Vegas, that's going to have a little bit of everything because you have two high-powered offense. You have two teams that can go. You have guys who are poised to win now. It's I don't want to say it's the Jack Eichel versus Connor McDavid square off because remember they both went They went first and second overall in their draft year, and there were people talking they were completely wrong that Eichel was contending to be to go first overall that year, and we look how that turned out. But Eichel's a hell of a player, and he might have something to prove. The Golden Knights, they found a way to usurp the cap system a little bit. So Stone, he got to find a way to not play most of the season, so he's well rested. The only thing you got is like how much Draisaitl is the X factor in this series, because if the Golden Knights focus in on McDavid too much, Draisaitl's going to burn them, and Draisaitl showed that against the Los Angeles Kings in the first round. The thing that I don't like so much, like it's both teams, Lou, and the goaltending. Like I'm a goaltender hugger. There's no getting around that. The Lawrence or Larry Boissault for the Golden Knights and Stuart Skinner, both basically unproven guys in the National Hockey League, and you don't know what you're going to get and what's going to happen between their ears, because you got two high-powered offenses. You got a lot of flash and dash in that series. The thing that might be another X factor a little bit is that the Golden Knights Vegas, they didn't have much of a pushback in their first round matchup with Winnipeg. They won in 5, but Winnipeg looked disinterested throughout that series. So they kind of coasted to a series win, whereas that Kings team pushed a lot against Edmonton. That Kings team was really good. That's going to be a hell of a series. It's going to be a toss-up. That might be a Game 7 overtime kind of a deal, unless McDavid goes video game like he's been doing all year. But I think that's a 7-game bang and crash and high scoring in my opinion.
Last one we haven't spent a whole lot of time on, but of course it's Jersey and Carolina. Maybe, I want to say Schmidt might be playing the best of all the goaltenders, but he's had a couple of clunkers too in that series against the Rangers. Carolina is one of those teams under the radar. They don't get a lot of ink. They don't get a lot of pub, whatever. But Rod Brindamore, I think, has got them playing real well. They beat a pesky Islander team in round 1. What do you see out of this one, Brent? I've been going back and forth on it. I don't have a feel for this one. I'm going to say I'm going to go with Carolina, maybe because they got home ice. I don't know.
It's crazy you mentioned home ice because the first round home ice was not good for anybody.
Yeah.
30-19, I think, was the stats for the road teams, and even the 2 game sevens the visiting team won. And then last night the 2 visiting team won again last night. So you just don't know about this home ice advantage. It used to be a lock that was almost a guaranteed win in the playoffs. Now home ice isn't a thing. I like it with that Carolina team has a guy like Brent Burns out there playing a little bit of hockey, playing some old school hockey. He's the kind of guy who can be a calming influence on the younger players. Is Rod Brindamore a better coach than Lindy Ruff? I don't know. This might be Brindamore's time to shine, but Schmid's a better goaltender than anything that Carolina can throw out there. You just don't know, but how long will this Schmid thing last? Because it's lightning in a bottle. Like every once in a while, you go back to 96, Lou, when Patrick Waugh came out of nowhere and he won a Stanley Cup. So was that one of these things? Or more recently, Jordan Binnington with the St. Louis Blues coming out of nowhere? Because I think that Carolina team has a bit of pop. They have some guys who won Stanley Cups. I think that's invaluable for a lot of these younger teams to have those guys who have won before. Okay, this is what we have to do. This is what we did back then. And I think kids will listen a little bit. I shouldn't say a lot because it just seems to be a different era of hockey player. But I like that Carolina team to maybe go on to win this one. And they're out of the 4 teams left, they might be the most complete team going, because I think that they have better goaltending than the Leafs do, and I just don't trust the Leafs. That's what it comes down to. I just don't trust the Leafs. But yeah, no, I like that Sebastian Aho's a good player, but Hershire and Jack Hughes wasn't great in the first round for Jersey, so expect him to step it up a little bit. That could be another 6-7 kind of a series. Like you said, that doesn't get a whole bunch of publicity except for around and eyeballs, except for hockey guys like me and you, hockey dorks per se, I guess you can be called. But like it's not a sexy series, but I think it's going to be a very good playoff round.
Well, I'd be remiss without asking you about this. You brought it up briefly earlier. Daryl Sutter out as coach at Calgary. I think we all saw it coming. You mentioned it. They're kind of a mess up there right now. And, it's too bad. You hate to see anybody lose a job. But it's almost like they're a rudderless ship right now. And it's going to be a rough go, I think, in Calgary for a while.
The thing you got there, Lou, is that I don't think that Daryl Sutter learned or forgot how to coach. A year ago, almost the day he was nominated for a Jack Adams Trophy, and then now he's out of a job. So did he become a bad coach in a year? No. The GM made some deals that he had to make when Kachuk said I'm out, and when Johnny Gaudreau opted out of nowhere and went to the powerhouse Columbus Blue Jackets of all places to be closer to home, which isn't really much closer when it comes down to it. Still a couple of jet rides away, but that franchise is in a mess. They haven't won a cup since '89, haven't really been relevant. They had that little run in 2004, I think it was, but the building is old. Players don't want to go there, and the guys that they were forced to go get, like Huberdeau and like Kadri, Kadri's a bit too unspoken for my liking. I mean, I like when guys talk, because we complain a lot that guys don't talk enough. As athletes, they don't say things that's on their mind, but Kadri is never one to mince his words, and maybe doesn't pick the right spots to do it. And it was a bad look for a lot of things that Sutter was doing. Some of the guys he was playing at times in certain spots, because he's not a prospect hugger by any means. He was still throwing Lucic out there. He was going with Tyler Toffoli, who had a 30-goal season, and he was one of Sutter's guys in LA. Calgary's in an absolute mess. They're, like you said, they're a rudderless ship. They don't have a GM right now. They don't have much going for them. There's people not renewing their season tickets. I'm only 2 hours away from Calgary, where I am here in southern Alberta. It was bad. Huberdeau came out and was talking some pretty not nice things about Sutter in the papers around here yesterday. Yes, people still read papers now and then, Lou. It's not very often. It's one of those things. But you wonder where that franchise can go and how they're going to piece it all together. Because they're, like I said earlier, you watch the teams that are in the playoffs compared to the teams that are out. The teams that are out aren't close. Like, they're not, and it's a bad situation for a lot of these National Hockey League teams. But it's the game's in really good shape, I think. But the teams that have nots are a long ways away, and Calgary's one of them.
Now, when I have somebody on my show for the first time, I always do this to you. I'm not trying to date you, but what is the first Stanley Cup playoff run that you can remember watching as a youngster?
I remember because my friend, he's man, I'm getting old, Louis. Thanks for reminding me. No, it's one of those things. My friend across the alley on 19th Street in Fort McLeod, this little small town of 3,000, just down. It's his parents still live there, I think. But he was an Islanders guy, and he had an Islanders jersey. So so I remember watching those Islanders a little bit, but the one I remember was '83 when the Edmonton Oilers made their first run, and they swept aside. I think they swept aside Chicago in the semifinals of the what was it, the Campbell Conference back then?
Yes,
and
yes.
then they went on to get swept. The Gretzky team, because that's when he scored 160 points, whatever it was. So everybody in Alberta was all Gretzky, because we got a lot of that on TV here. So the Gretzky losing to the Islanders in 4 straight, that's the one I remember the most, was that one, and it was the fourth Stanley Cup for the Islanders. And the thing I remember the most was the post game a while later, not the post game, but like the postseason pressers and stuff about the Islanders, how they were beat up sitting in the dressing room, and the Oilers, they were all whatever. We're young, we're going to get a chance of this. And that's when Gretzky said that's when we learned what it took to win, and it wasn't just scoring a bunch of points. And you had to battle, and that was the catapulted the Oilers their Stanley Cup. So 1983, I would have been 9-10 years old, I guess, back then. So that's the one I remember the most, Lou.
Well, the first one I remember was, I was 12 years old, was I think 1977 when Detroit made it, and they played the Atlanta Flames in the opening round and beat them. And then they went up against the mighty Canadiens the year that they won 62 games or whatever, and actually won the first game. And then after that, it was like, okay, guys, like Scotty Bowman, I remember him coming out and reading it in the Detroit Free Press, said, all right, enough of this. We're done fooling around with these Detroit Red Wings. And they won 4 straight and won the cup. Yeah. And then of course, then Detroit went back down in their tailspin for years. I remember going to Joe Louis. They would give away a car every day to get people into the rink for the Detroit Red Wings games in the 80s. But those are good memories back then.
It's crazy, Lee. You talk about those teams in Detroit and the Norris division in general, how bad the Norris was back in the 80s. Like, there were some bad hockey clubs, factoring the Minnesota North Stars, the St. Louis Blues. Like, St. Louis almost moved to Saskatoon of all places at one point.
Wow.
And it was the Norris, because there was sweatshirts, the Norris division, how bad it was back. Yeah, it was terrible. Just awful hockey back then. It was different hockey. I shouldn't say awful, because hockey's never that awful, but it was different hockey.
Well, it's funny because, Jacques Lemaire was coaching Detroit back in the mid 80s. And I can remember they would win the Norris, like I said earlier, they would do the conference or the playoffs where you do it, your division first, and then you'd play the winner of Edmonton's division. And the year, I think it was 87, maybe 87 or 88, Detroit won their, the Norris tournament, we used to call it. And then they played Edmonton again. They won up in Edmonton the first game. And boy, the expectations were high. And then it was like Gretzky and the boys said, all right, that's it. And then they won 4 straight, and it was in dominant fashion. Gosh, great memories, of watching hockey back then, I tell you.
Yeah, you talk about like when the Norris Division winner had to play the Smythe Division winner, and like just down the road, the Edmonton Oilers had the Calgary Flames as their rival, and they were the second best team in hockey, and they only got out of the Smythe Division twice, right? And then you go a little bit further west, how good those Winnipeg teams were with Dale Hawerchuk and Thomas Steen. They were great hockey teams, and they didn't have a hope in hell against those Gretzky-led Oilers teams, and then those Flames teams that were winning President's trophies. They just couldn't get it done for whatever reason. Yeah, so it was. I wish that they would find a way to alter the playoff system to get it back to get some different matchups. Try something different, 1 to 8 or whatever it might be. Because the way it's set up now, you kind of know who's going to go. People say go through 1 through 16. But that's just unreasonable to travel that would happen and everything else. But yeah, it's still great. Like you usually end up with the team that's supposed to win. Usually ends up in the finals or gets there, and the team that earns it, they really earn it. And I think I personally think it's the greatest tournament in hockey, because putting together 4 wins in a row, or 4 wins out of 7, and the travel and the way these guys get beat up, I still think it's the greatest tournament in professional sports.
Real quick before I let you go, I appreciate you taking time out this morning, Brent. I want to talk a little baseball with you. 30-game point. First of all, my first question for you on that is, what do you think of the rule changes, how they've affected the game? Have you been for it? What's your initial take after a month into the season?
I like that there's a lot more action on the bases. I like that there's
Yeah.
more stealing. I like. I'm not a big fan. When we had you on our show, we were talking
Yep.
about the pace of the game and everything else, and I'm not sure. Like I'm not used to that yet because I don't mind sitting and having a few beers in front of me watching the game, and also I don't get to finish my six pack because the game's already over. That's the one I'm not used to that yet. But I like the action on the bases. I like that a guy is going no matter what, that they're having a chance to steal base. I don't know if the size of the bases has anything to do with that. I don't think that's going to, that half an inch or an inch is going to make or break a base stealer. But having the action on the base, I like quite a bit. Yeah, no, I enjoy it. Like it hasn't made the game worse. Like it hasn't made it better a ton. I don't know about a ton better, but it's a better. I like it.
And how's your Pittsburgh stock? Best team in the National League right now. How about those Pirates, huh?
That is unbelievable. Their record going in right now, and they go getting McCutcheon back there. Maybe that's got a little bit of pickup we need. Say, hey boys, you might only get one shot to do this. He's been in the league for a long time, and having a guy back there who's say, hey, jump on my back. Let's give this a shot. Let's have some fun, and let's see what we can do. It's crazy to think that you have two teams that don't spend anything are leading their divisions, also with Tampa, or their leagues with Tampa as well. But Pittsburgh, man, oh man, you got to see how those. You got to think that other franchises, Lou, that are going to their GMs and their analytics guy and saying, "Hey, I'm spending $300 million here, and we're in last place. These guys are spending $60 million, and they're in first place, and it ain't close right now. What's going on? Yeah, it's crazy."
Here, Detroit coming up this week. And this one, I'll let you go. We got Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander going back to back against us tonight and tomorrow afternoon. Detroit's about where you and I talked about where they would be.
Yeah.
Third place. They're just struggling to get the bats and a little bit of everything. Injuries like everybody else. But this is going to be interesting to watch that here tonight and tomorrow afternoon with Max and Verlander making a return trip, both of them in a Mets uniform. It's going to be weird.
That is strange that's even happening that all these years later that they're still out there pitching. And I know the miracles of modern science with Tommy John and everything else, how they can make that work. So you go, yeah, well, here we go. I would suggest you get in your seat early because I think there's going to be a lot of strikeouts. Those games might be a little bit quicker than usual. It's crazy. Detroit said like they're Detroit. They're mired in mediocrity, and like you said, they just don't seem to have a winning formula yet. Getting anything what they want to do, they're just there, collecting money and not doing anything. Scherzer and Verlander, you like for Mets fans, you got to hope that Mets fans are hoping for not just good starts, but really good starts, throw some innings, see what they got, because it's a grind. It's a long season, and the Mets are only going to go as far as the money that they put in Scherzer and Verlander's pockets, and they haven't lived up to expectations so far. They're going to get healthy and they'll be better, but you put that much stock as Cone did in those two guys. He must be getting his butt cheeks clenched a little bit. Like, oh, what did I do here with this kind of money? Because no matter if you have $14 billion in the bank or not, you spend $300 million or $350 million, you're still spending $350 million. And he probably wants to see something pretty electric these next couple of days.
Well, Brent, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on with the 1420 Sports Bar podcast.
1420 Sports Bar podcast, busy around here all the time at World Headquarters. Every morning we got a show, usually around 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, because I like to sleep a little bit eventually by the time the games get done, and doing all my research the day before. We have a regular show Mondays and Thursdays with my co-host Dave, and a new little venture we've started for last call we do on Sunday nights Mountain Standard Time. Basically a YouTube thing that we're trying to get going there, and just the wrap up of the weekend or or whatever it might be. And Lou, you came on for the initial one of that. Mm-hmm. That went really well. So no, we talk all sports. We stay away from basketball a little because that's not really middle-aged 6'2" guys pedigree, I guess. It's one of those things. But we talk a lot of hockey, a lot of baseball, and football's in the off season now, but the draft. So we got a lot going on here, and it's always a lot of fun talking sports.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out this morning. Keep the faith for your Maple Leafs. Game 2 tomorrow. Maybe they can even it up and take it back down to Florida and get control of the series. This has been an absolute treat, Brent. I appreciate you coming on. Enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs, man.
Always do, Lou, and thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Brent Radlinsky from the 1420 Sports Bar podcast. Always a great chance to get him on. Always informative. getting us up to date on the Stanley Cup playoffs. Round 2 underway tonight. The other first round game starting with the New Jersey Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes. And of course, we also have the Vegas Golden Knights and the Edmonton Oilers. That is going to be one hell of a series right there. We're going to take a quick look at the NBA with their round 2. I know we don't spend a whole lot of time on that, but I'd be remiss without talking about that. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about Mahler Brothers Golf. If you're like me, you want to look good on the golf course. And if you're like me, I don't get to play enough, especially now since I'm on the disabled list, if you will. But a lot of times when you want to look good on the golf course, it sometimes comes at the expense of feeling good. But we here at Mahler Brothers Golf, they've got just that answer for you. They've got a great selection of T-shirts, hats, tumblers, so much more. But their polos are what I want to talk about. They're lightweight and stretchy material, hugs your body, helps you feel cool, and you'll look cool. And you know what the saying is? You look good, you feel good. You feel good, you play good. That is what Mahler Brothers is all about. Check them out, MahlerBrothers.com, MahlerBrothers.com. And as it says on the bottom of the screen, use the promo code BELLYUP for 15% off discount. Mahler Brothers Golf, all their greatest, they've got a lot of great stuff on there. I've checked it out. Once I get going here at the end of July, I'll be sporting the Mahler Brothers polo shirts for sure. But go to their website, MahlerBrothers.com. Use the promo code BELLYUP, which is right there on the bottom of the screen. Get 15% off your purchase. That is, of course, MahlerBrothers.com. Want to thank Brent Radlinsky again for joining us from the 1420 Sports Bar podcast. Again, check them out every morning, 7 o'clock or 7:30 Mountain Time, and then weeknight or Sunday nights for their wrap-up show, Mondays and Thursday nights. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. That's the 1420 Sports Bar podcast. They got a lot of great stuff going on over there. NBA round 2, real quick. We'll get into that. Last night, of course, was the Lakers and the Warriors, but Denver taking on Phoenix. They got a 2-0 lead. You never hear anything about Denver. Now they got to go to Phoenix for game 3. Can they keep the momentum up? Boston and Philadelphia, game 2 tonight, I believe, in that series. Joel Embiid got the MVP. Congratulations to him. Well-deserved. He had a great season. James Harden, is he going to be able to keep that up? 45 points. Is it going to be the James Harden that checked out in some of the other playoff series, or is it going to be a James Harden that might finally be able to keep it going to get Philadelphia a ring? Boston, are they overrated? That's another question. I know it's just one game, but it was kind of like in the opening round when they took on Atlanta. It just looked like they let them hang around way too much. And they can't do that against Philadelphia. And they got to be careful now. Philadelphia's wrangled home court advantage away. If they can even it up tonight, well, then it might be a different story. But again, round 2, this is where really the rubber starts to hit the road. Game 2 tonight. See if Boston can even up the series, make it 1-1. And in the Western Conference last night, LeBron and Steph back and forth. A very good defensive performance by the Lakers. It didn't come down to Steph, obviously, or LeBron. AD, 30 points, 20 rebounds. First one since, I believe, Shaq to be able to do that back in 1996, or I can't remember what year it was. But the Lakers took game 1. They've got home court advantage now. Jordan Poole, a wide-open 30-footer to possibly win it for the Warriors in game 1. I don't begrudge him for taking that shot. But that series is far from over. I see the Warriors coming back in game 2, making a statement, evening it up, and bringing it back to the Eastern or to LA 1-1. I still like the Warriors winning that series. It could go 6 or 7. This one will probably go 7. And, it's going to make for a great series there. And the Knicks and the Heat, that's up at 1-1. That one I think is going to go 7. And that's going to be a fun game to watch. You know me, I'm not a New York guy, but I'm kind of rooting for the Knicks, and I'll tell you why. Their fans have been suffering for a long, long time, 50 years since they won a championship. They've had flashes of possibly getting there, obviously, in the 90s when the Knicks went to the finals against Houston. But, it's a passionate group there in New York. A lot of history at the Garden, obviously the Mecca, Madison Square Garden. I'm kind of, I don't really have a dog in that fight. Miami, Jimmy Butler, what can you say? What he did against the Bucks, with his bad ankle, that's going to be a question mark for the Heat. But I like I like the makeup of their team as well. But I'm rooting for the Knicks fans. How does that sound? Because I know they've suffered for a long time, a passionate bunch. But that's going to be a great series, though, as well. Game 7, or probably going to be a Game 7 scenario in that one too. So the NBA round 2. Hopefully, for their sake, the series are a little more interesting. It's going to be taking a lot to match the intensity, in my opinion, of the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs. Because to me, there's nothing better. Well, that's going to do it here tonight. This morning, rather. It's going to take me a while to get used to doing these shows in the morning. For those of you that don't know, we normally do our shows during the week on Wednesday nights, Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 7 o'clock Eastern time. But with me being on the disabled list, having surgery on my foot, set here for a few weeks or a few months. So I thought, why not have 3 times a week show? So we're going to try something different in the morning here at 10 o'clock. So we'll be back on Friday talking Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll do a little bit more on Major League Baseball on Friday. We'll get you up to date on the NBA as far as where their series stand. And we're going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal on Friday as well, too, with college football. Kind of hitting home a little bit here in the East Lansing, Michigan area. So we'll get more into that as well. Maybe we can get someone on to help talk about that. So we appreciate everybody tuning into the show. Again, we are powered up by Belly Up Sports. Check out our website, bellyupsports.com, for a complete list of all of our podcasts, all of our shows. And, of course, check out the articles. We got a great bunch of writers diving into all the playoffs, all the sports that we cover, anything from pro wrestling to Stanley Cup hockey, the NFL, Major League Baseball, you name it, the NBA, and everything in between. So check us out at bellyupsports.com. Well, that's going to do it here tonight, or this morning, rather. Want to again thank Brent Radlinsky for coming on the show from the 1420 Sports Bar podcast. I want to thank you, the viewer, for taking time out tonight to be a part of the show here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. Until Friday morning, Captain Lou's saying, keep your heads up, keep your sticks down, keep your feet moving, and as always, keep your minds open. Thanks for joining us here. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the hockey. Enjoy life. Get out and enjoy it, as I mentioned. We'll see you Friday here on the Captain Lou Sports Network, here on YouTube, and, of course, the Captain Lou Extravaganza from Belly Up Sports. So long.